Good evening, and welcome to AJP's closing brief. Korea's benchmark reclaimed the 7,000 line today, and the stock that led it was not a chip maker. Today, Northeast Asia paid for what companies own, not for what they make. Overnight, the Financial Times reported that the American artificial intelligence lab, Anthropic, could go public in October at a valuation above $2 trillion. That single report reordered Asian trading. In Seoul, the best performing large stock was a telephone company that happens to hold about 2% of Anthropic. In Tokyo, the same logic lifted SoftBank Group, Advantest, and Kioxia, the names investors treat as claims on the artificial intelligence build-out rather than as manufacturers. In Shanghai, there was nothing comparable to buy. China's market has no listed claim on the frontier laboratories, and its index finished effectively unchanged while more than 3,000 stocks fell. Korea closed up more than 2%, Japan up more than 0.5%, Shanghai flat. The gap between the three was not growth, and it was not policy. It was access. The flow is the story. Foreign investors bought a net 3 trillion won of Korean shares, a fourth consecutive session of heavy buying, while individuals sold 2 trillion and institutions sold 1 trillion. The KOSPI closed at around 6,978, up more than 2% after trading above 7,000 during the session for the first time since the early August sell-off. 677 stocks rose against 204 falling, with 3 at the daily limit and none at the floor, but this was a large capitalization event. The KOSPI 200 gained more than 2%, while the small cap KOSDAQ managed less than 0.5%. Wireless telecom led every sector, up more than 8%. SK Telecom closed at around 100,501, or around $71, up more than 10% on the Anthropic report, and is being re-rated from a dividend utility into an artificial intelligence holding company. Autos followed, with Hyundai Motor at around 453,001, or around $320, up around 8%. Oil and gas came third. GS rose nearly 9% after Washington threatened new measures against Iran and reaffirmed its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Samsung Electronics and SK hynix added only around 2 and 3%. On the day Korea reclaimed 7,000, the semiconductor pair were the laggards. Shanghai went nowhere. The composite finished at around 3,926, effectively unchanged, on turnover that shrank sharply from the previous session. By midday, more than 3,400 stocks were falling. There was no leadership, and the index remains capped beneath its annual moving average, a level that has turned back every attempt this month. Money did 3 things instead. It hid in pharmaceuticals. Shanghai Pharmaceutical closed at the daily limit of 10%, at around 6 yuan, a second straight limit up. It chased whatever narrow theme still worked. Hangzhou Cable also closed limit up at around 30 yuan, on strength in optical fiber and optical modules, the one artificial intelligence adjacent trade with momentum. And it liquidated. Chongqing Chinan fell the full 10% limit to around 14 yuan, one of several recent speculative winners dumped wholesale. The absence matters as much as the action. China is the effective buyer of last resort for Iranian crude. The same Hormuz headline that handed Korean refiners a margin windfall reads in Shanghai as a bill, not a bonus. The Nikkei closed at around 68,710, up around 400 points, or more than 0.5%. That understates the day. Within 10 minutes of the open, the index was up nearly 1,300 points, above 69,600, its highest in a month, and it then surrendered roughly 2/3 of that. The morning was built on the same trade as Seoul. Advantest closed at around 36,900 yen, up around 3%, at a record high on a split-adjusted basis for a second consecutive session. SoftBank Group closed at around 5,740 yen, up around 3%. Kioxia added nearly 4% to around 53,700 yen, lifted by a surge in its American memory partner SanDisk. What took it back was domestic. The yen sat near 159 to the dollar. Japanese long-term yields kept grinding higher, and expectations are building that the Bank of Japan raises rates in September. That pressured property stocks and capped the index. Today was also the August settlement day for futures and options. And foreigners have now been net sellers of Japanese equities for 2 straight weeks, even as they bought 3 trillion won of Korea in a single session. 2 headlines, 3 answers. Korea took the artificial intelligence ownership trade and the oil windfall together and rose the most. Japan took the first and paid for it with its own bond market. China took neither. But Seoul's rally rests on an initial public offering that has not been priced and a blockade that has not been lifted. Neither of those is under Korea's control, and both can be repriced before Monday's open. We'll be back Monday with the first Asian reaction to whatever Washington announces on Iran next week. Subscribe to stay with us. Thank you for watching AJP.